I'm Jessica, 35, and my 10th wedding anniversary became the night I discovered who my husband Michael truly was. We were celebrating at Fleming's with his family when something felt off about his behavior. When I returned early from the restroom, I saw him drop something into my champagne. In that moment, I made a decision that would save my life but expose a terrifying truth. If you've ever had that gut feeling something wasn't right in your relationship, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe. My story might just save your life. Michael and I met at a marketing conference in Chicago 12 years ago. I was presenting a case study on digital strategy while he was there representing his investment firm. Our eyes met across the crowded room during my presentation, and I noticed him nodding appreciatively at my key points. Later, at the networking reception, he approached me with 2 glasses of champagne and a compliment about my insights on consumer behavior that showed he'd actually been listening. "Your approach to segmentation was brilliant," he said, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled. "Most people in that room didn't fully grasp what you were saying, but I did." That first conversation lasted 3 hours, long after the reception had ended. Michael was charismatic, articulate, and seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and ideas. By the end of the conference weekend, we'd exchanged numbers and made plans for dinner when we returned to Boston, where we both lived yet had never crossed paths. Our romance was whirlwind and intoxicating. Michael took me to exclusive restaurants, surprised me with weekend getaways to coastal Maine, and remembered little details about things I liked. 6 months into dating, he proposed at sunset on a private boat in Boston Harbor, with the city's skyline glittering behind us. The ring was platinum with a flawless diamond that caught every ray of light. I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was everything I'd dreamed of, an elegant affair at the Boston Public Library with 200 guests. Michael's parents, Robert and Patricia Bradford, spared no expense. They were old money from Beacon Hill, and while they were always polite to me, I sensed they thought their son could have chosen someone from their social circle instead of a self-made marketing executive whose parents were school teachers from Western Massachusetts. But it was Michael's sister Amanda who made her disapproval most apparent. Even at our wedding, she found ways to subtly undermine me, commenting that my dress was almost as beautiful as her friend's recent wedding gown, or loudly reminiscing about Michael's ex-girlfriend Caroline, who unfortunately couldn't make it, but sent her best wishes. Despite these undercurrents, the early years of our marriage were blissful. We bought a beautiful brownstone in Back Bay, traveled extensively, and built what I thought was a partnership of equals. Michael's career in investment banking soared, and my marketing agency attracted prestigious clients. We talked about starting a family someday, but we're enjoying our life together too much to rush. The first warning signs appeared so gradually I barely noticed them. Michael began questioning my spending, despite my substantial income. He suggested I consolidate my separate accounts into our joint ones for simplicity. When I declined, explaining I valued financial independence, he sulked for days. He began making comments about my late nights at the office, insinuating I was neglecting our marriage for my career. "I just want more time with my beautiful wife," he would say, wrapping his arms around me. Is that so wrong? Put that way, his behavior seemed like loving concern rather than control. So I started coming home earlier, turning down business trips, and declining evening networking events. Gradually, I saw less of my college friends. My weekly calls with my parents shortened as Michael would frequently interrupt with household questions or dinner plans. By our 5th anniversary, my world had shrunk considerably. I maintained my career, but my social circle consisted primarily of Michael's colleagues and their wives, most of whom seemed to exist mainly as accessories to their husband's success. My close friend Sophia tried to point this out during a rare lunch when Michael was out of town. "I hardly see you anymore, Jess," she said, concern evident in her eyes. "And when I do, you're always checking your phone like you're afraid to miss his call." I dismissed her concerns, insisting I was happily in love and that Michael was just attentive. But her words planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't entirely ignore. In the months leading up to our 10th anniversary, Michael's behavior became increasingly erratic. He took mysterious phone calls in the bathroom with the shower running, claimed to be working late, but arrived home with no briefcase and smelling of unfamiliar perfume, and became obsessively protective of his phone. When I asked innocent questions, he would turn them around on me, accusing me of not trusting him or being paranoid. Still, I clung to the hope that we could recapture what we once had. When Michael suggested a special anniversary dinner with his family at Fleming's, an upscale steakhouse, I was touched. Perhaps he was making an effort to reconnect and celebrate our milestone properly. I spent the day of our anniversary getting ready, a spa treatment, hair blown out in soft waves, and a new midnight blue dress that hugged my curves. As I applied my lipstick, I studied my reflection and wondered if tonight might be a turning point for us. Maybe the distance I'd felt growing between us would close. Maybe Amanda would finally be civil to me. Maybe we could start fresh. If only I'd known what the evening would actually bring. Fleming's Steakhouse exuded old-world elegance, with its mahogany paneling, crisp white tablecloths, and ambient lighting from crystal chandeliers. Our reserved table sat in a semi-private alcove with views of the Boston Common, perfectly set for 6 people. When Michael and I arrived, the maitre d' escorted us with practiced deference, pulling out my chair with a flourish. "You look stunning," Michael whispered, his hand at the small of my back. For a moment, I felt that familiar flutter, the one I'd experienced during our early days together. His gray suit was impeccably tailored, and he'd worn the cufflinks I'd given him for his birthday. Perhaps tonight would be special after all. The hopeful atmosphere lasted approximately 7 minutes, until Amanda arrived with her husband Tyler. She air-kissed my cheeks, her lips never actually touching my skin, before embracing Michael with genuine warmth. "Happy anniversary to my favorite brother," she gushed, completely ignoring that he was her only brother. She wore a striking red dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, her blonde hair arranged in an artful updo that made my professional blowout seem pedestrian by comparison. "Jessica," she acknowledged finally, her eyes scanning my outfit. "Blue again? You do stick with what works for you, don't you?" The comment was delivered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Tyler, perpetually uncomfortable with his wife's behavior, shook Michael's hand and gave me a genuine hug. "You look beautiful, Jess," he said kindly. "Happy anniversary." Robert and Patricia Bradford arrived moments later, impeccably dressed and precisely on time as always. Robert's silver hair and commanding presence turned heads even in this upscale establishment. Patricia's pearls and Chanel suit spoke of inherited wealth and meticulous attention to detail. 10 years, Patricia said, patting my hand with cool fingers adorned with family heirloom rings. How time flies. The sommelier approached with practiced timing, and Michael immediately took charge. "We'll have the Dom Perignon Rose," he announced without consulting the wine list. "The 2008 vintage, if you have it." "Excellent choice, sir," the sommelier nodded approvingly. I raised an eyebrow at Michael. The champagne he'd selected cost over $500 a bottle. While we were comfortable financially, such extravagance wasn't typical for him lately. In fact, he'd complained about my much more modest clothing purchase just last week. "It's a special occasion," he said, catching my expression. "Nothing but the best for our 10th. Amanda leaned forward, adjusting her napkin. "So, Jessica, is your little marketing agency still doing those social media campaigns for local businesses? How quaint." I forced a smile. "Actually, we just signed McKinsey as a client last month. We'll be handling their entire digital transformation strategy." Michael cut in before Amanda could respond. "Jessica, you never mentioned McKinsey to me." "I did, actually. 3 times. I kept my tone light despite the tension building in my shoulders. Remember? I told you when I pitched them, when we made it to the final round, and when we got the contract." Michael frowned slightly, then covered it with a laugh. "Well, congratulations then." I've been so busy with the Westlake merger, it must have slipped my mind. The champagne arrived with appropriate ceremony, 6 crystal flutes arranged on a silver tray. The sommelier poured a taste for Michael, who nodded his approval after a perfunctory sip. As our glasses were filled, I noticed Michael checking his watch for the 3rd time since we'd sat down. "Are you expecting a call?" I asked. "No, just keeping track of time. I made special arrangements for dessert later," he replied smoothly, raising his glass. "To 10 years with my beautiful wife." Everyone echoed the toast, and I took a small sip of the exceptional champagne. The bubbles danced on my tongue, but I couldn't fully enjoy it. Something felt off about Michael's demeanor, a tightness around his eyes, a slight tremor in his hand. As the appetizers arrived, seared scallops for me, beef carpaccio for Michael, he became increasingly insistent about my champagne consumption. "You've barely touched your drink," he noted, gesturing to my nearly full glass. "Don't you like it?" "It's delicious." "I'm just pacing myself," I explained. "You know champagne goes straight to my head." "But it's our anniversary," he pressed, his tone light but his eyes intense. "Live a little." Amanda interjected, "Yes, Jessica, do loosen up. You're always so controlled." Their combined pressure made me uncomfortable. I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment alone to gather my thoughts. The elegant marble bathroom was blissfully empty. I leaned against the cool countertop, studying my reflection in the ornate mirror. Who was this woman staring back at me? I looked polished and put together on the outside, but inside I felt increasingly hollow. When had my marriage become this performance? When had I started walking on eggshells around my own husband? My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "How's the anniversary dinner going? Still on for Coffee Tuesday?" I stared at the message, realizing I hadn't responded to her last 3 texts. Michael had been monopolizing my evenings, always with some reason I couldn't meet her. I quickly typed back, "It's fine. Yes for Tuesday. Miss you." Taking a deep breath, I reapplied my lipstick and squared my shoulders. I could make it through this dinner. Tomorrow, I would think more seriously about what was happening to my marriage, but tonight I would smile and play my part. I had no idea that in just minutes, everything would change forever. I left the restroom and started back toward our table, but paused near the bar to check a work email that had just pinged on my phone. That's when I glanced up and saw something that made my blood run cold. Through a gap between the bartender and a server, I had a clear line of sight to our table. Michael was hunched slightly forward, his back to me, focused intently on something in his hand. In one quick, practiced motion, he dropped something into my champagne glass and gave it a subtle swirl with his finger. The tiny object dissolved almost instantly, leaving no trace in the pale pink liquid. I froze, my mind refusing to process what I'd just witnessed. My husband had just drugged my drink. The reality was so shocking, so beyond my comprehension, that for several seconds I simply stood there, my body ice cold despite the restaurant's warm atmosphere. A server passed by, momentarily blocking my view. I used that opportunity to slip behind a decorative column, out of sight from our table. My heart hammered against my ribs, and my breathing came in short, panicked gasps. I pressed my back against the cool surface, trying to steady myself. Had I really seen what I thought I saw? Could there be an innocent explanation? Perhaps a surprise toast with some harmless addition to my drink? But the furtive way he'd looked around first, the practiced speed of his movement, the way he'd checked his watch repeatedly throughout the evening, none of it suggested innocence. And suddenly, other puzzling incidents began to click into place. 3 weeks ago, I'd woken up disoriented and groggy after Michael insisted I take a sleeping pill for my insomnia, a condition I'd never actually suffered from. I'd lost nearly 12 hours and couldn't remember going to bed. When I mentioned the strange experience to Michael, he dismissed it, saying I was probably just exhausted from work. Last month, after dinner at home, I'd experienced unexpected dizziness and nausea. Michael had been solicitous, helping me to bed and saying I must have caught a stomach bug. The next morning, I discovered my grandmother's necklace missing from my jewelry box. When I frantically searched for it, Michael suggested I might have misplaced it, though I distinctly remembered wearing it the previous evening. And just last week, after Michael insisted on making me a special anniversary countdown cocktail, I'd awakened to find him going through my email on my laptop. He'd claimed he was looking for a confirmation for a surprise he'd planned. Each incident seemed innocuous when isolated, but strung together in light of what I'd just witnessed, they formed a terrifying pattern. My husband had been drugging me. The question was, why? I struggled to control my breathing, to think rationally through the panic clouding my mind. I couldn't confront him here, surrounded by his family. I had no proof, and they would never believe me over him. Amanda would probably suggest I was having a mental breakdown. I needed evidence, and I needed to ensure my safety. A plan began to form in my mind, imperfect, potentially dangerous, but the only option I could see. Taking a deep breath, I composed my face into a neutral expression and made my way back to the table. "Sorry for the delay," I said, sliding into my seat with a forced smile. I ran into Melissa from yoga. "You remember her, don't you, Michael?" He nodded vaguely, but I caught the flash of relief in his eyes when he saw me sit down. His gaze immediately went to my still full champagne flute. "Your champagne's getting flat," he noted casually. "Should we get you a fresh glass?" "No, this is fine," I replied, reaching for it but not drinking. I don't want to waste such expensive champagne. My eyes scanned the table and landed on Amanda's glass. She had barely touched her champagne, preferring the Cabernet she'd ordered separately. Her flute sat nearly full beside my own, the bubbles still rising through the identical rose-tinted liquid. As the main courses arrived, a medium-rare filet mignon for Michael, sea bass for me, I carefully orchestrated my movements. While everyone was distracted by the elaborate presentation of their dishes, I casually moved my hand as if reaching for the bread basket and accidentally knocked over Amanda's water glass. "Oh, I'm so sorry," I exclaimed as water spilled toward her designer dress. As she jumped up and everyone's attention focused on the small chaos, I swiftly switched our champagne glasses. The entire maneuver took less than 3 seconds. "No harm done," Robert said as servers rushed over with extra napkins. "Missed the dress completely." Amanda settled back into her seat with a huff, dabbing at non-existent water spots on her clothing. "Really, Jessica, you should be more careful." "You're absolutely right," I agreed, my heart racing but my voice steady. "So clumsy of me." Michael turned to me, lifting his glass. "Why don't we have another toast?" "To many more years together." Everyone raised their glasses. I brought the untainted champagne to my lips and pretended to sip while watching Michael over the rim. His eyes were fixed on me, an intensity in his gaze that I now recognized as anticipation rather than affection. "Drink up," he encouraged with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's really exceptional champagne." "It is," Amanda agreed, taking a deep swallow from what was now my drugged glass. "Though I still prefer the Cabernet." I set my glass down, continuing the charade of sipping occasionally while engaging in dinner conversation. Michael grew increasingly agitated as the minutes passed, his eyes darting between me and my still nearly full glass. "Are you feeling all right?" he asked, a strange edge to his voice. "You seem distracted." "I'm fine," I assured him, forcing myself to cut a piece of fish and eat it despite my churning stomach. Just savoring every moment of our special night. What I was actually doing was watching Amanda, counting the minutes, and praying that whatever Michael had put in my drink wouldn't cause her serious harm. 20 minutes into the main course, I noticed the first changes in Amanda's behavior. Her words began to slur slightly, and she interrupted her father mid-sentence with an uncharacteristic giggle. Patricia shot her daughter a disapproving glance, while Tyler looked at his wife with confusion. "Are you feeling okay, Amanda?" he asked quietly. "I'm perfectly fine," she replied, her voice louder than appropriate for the elegant setting. "Just celebrating my brother's happy marriage." She emphasized happy with exaggerated air quotes, then dissolved into another fit of giggles. Michael's face had gone pale. He stared at his sister with growing alarm, then back at me, his eyes narrowing slightly as realization dawned. I met his gaze steadily, letting him see that I knew exactly what he had done. For just a second, something cold and dangerous flashed across his features before he composed himself. "Amanda," Patricia hissed, "control yourself. People are looking." Indeed, several nearby diners had glanced our way. Amanda's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. She swayed slightly in her seat, her coordination visibly impaired. "I don't feel so good," she mumbled, knocking over her water glass, this time for real. The room is spinning. While everyone's attention focused on Amanda, I discreetly pulled out my phone beneath the table and began recording audio. I needed evidence of what was happening. "Perhaps you've had enough wine," Robert suggested, reaching for her Cabernet. "I barely had any wine," Amanda protested, her words running together. "Just the champagne. Michael's fancy anniversary champagne." She turned toward me, her eyes struggling to focus. "You didn't drink yours." "Smart girl. Always so careful." Michael intervened smoothly. "Amanda clearly isn't feeling well. Perhaps she should get some air. Tyler, would you take her outside for a moment?" "I think she needs more than air," Tyler said, concern evident in his voice as Amanda slumped against him. "Her pupils are dilated, and she's burning up. This isn't just alcohol." Patricia placed a cool hand on her daughter's forehead. "She does have a fever. Did she take any medication today that might have interacted with the alcohol?" "No, nothing," Tyler replied, growing increasingly worried. "She was fine before dinner." Under the table, I switched my phone to camera mode and managed to capture Michael's panicked expression as he watched his sister's condition deteriorate. His right leg bounced nervously, and he kept checking his watch. "Maybe we should call a doctor," I suggested, my voice perfectly calibrated to convey appropriate concern while revealing nothing of what I knew. Amanda suddenly lurched forward, nearly face-planting into her half-eaten steak. "I think I'm gonna be sick," she slurred. Tyler barely caught her before she slid from her chair. "That's it, I'm calling 911, he announced, already pulling out his phone. "Is that really necessary?" Michael interjected quickly. "It's probably just a bad reaction to the alcohol." Robert's expression hardened as he observed his daughter's condition. "My daughter doesn't collapse from a single glass of champagne, Michael. Something is very wrong here." As if to confirm his assessment, Amanda began convulsing, her body going rigid before trembling violently. The restaurant erupted in concerned murmurs as Tyler lowered her carefully to the floor, turning her on her side. "She's having a seizure," Patricia cried, her composure finally cracking. "Someone help." A woman from a nearby table rushed over. "I'm a doctor," she announced, kneeling beside Amanda. "Has she taken any drugs or medications?" "No, nothing," Tyler insisted. "She was completely fine before dinner." Throughout the chaos, I maintained a facade of appropriate distress while secretly continuing to document everything. Michael had backed away from the table, his face ashen, eyes darting toward the exit. I positioned myself between him and the door, pretending to make room for the gathering crowd. "I should call the restaurant manager," I said loudly enough for others to hear, then slipped away toward the front desk. Instead of finding the manager, I approached the security guard near the entrance. "My sister-in-law has collapsed," I explained breathlessly. "And I have reason to believe my husband drugged her drink. It was meant for me. Do you have security cameras covering our table?" The guard, a former police officer named Ethan according to his name tag, assessed me quickly. "We do. Section C, Table 12. Yes, that's us. Please, I need to see the footage from the past hour. It's literally a matter of life and death." Something in my desperate expression must have convinced him. "Come with me," he said, leading me to a small security office. On the monitors, we quickly located our table and rewound the footage. There it was, clear as day, Michael leaning over my drink when he thought no one was looking. The guard's expression hardened. "I'm calling this in right now," he said, reaching for his radio. "The paramedics are already on their way for your sister-in-law, but we'll need police as well." "Thank you," I whispered, my composure finally cracking as the reality of what had just happened, what had almost happened to me, sank in. As I returned to the dining room, paramedics were already loading Amanda onto a stretcher. Her condition had stabilized, but she remained unconscious. Patricia was crying quietly while Robert demanded answers from the restaurant staff. Tyler prepared to follow the paramedics to the hospital. And Michael stood alone, watching it all unfold with the expression of a man seeing his carefully constructed world crumble before his eyes. The restaurant had descended into controlled chaos. Other diners watched with a mixture of concern and morbid fascination as Amanda was wheeled out on a stretcher, an oxygen mask covering her face. Tyler followed close behind, his expression haunted as he clutched his wife's purse and phone. "I'll meet you at Massachusetts General," Patricia called after him, hastily gathering her things. She turned to Michael and me, tear tracks marring her perfect makeup. "We should go too. Family needs to stick together in crises." I noticed Michael inching toward the exit, his body language screaming flight. Before he could make his move, 2 police officers entered the restaurant, accompanied by the security guard I'd spoken with. Their purposeful stride toward our table told me everything I needed to know. "Michael Bradford?" the female officer asked, her hand resting casually near her holster. Michael straightened, switching instantly to the charming, confident persona I'd once fallen in love with. "Yes, that's me. Is this about my sister? We're just heading to the hospital now." "Sir, we need to ask you some questions first," the male officer said. "We have reason to believe a criminal act may have occurred here tonight." Patricia gasped. "What are you talking about?" "My daughter had some kind of medical episode." "What does that have to do with Michael?" The security guard, Ethan, stepped forward. "Ma'am, we have video evidence that your son tampered with a drink at this table earlier this evening." All eyes turned to Michael, whose facade cracked momentarily before he recovered. "This is absurd. I did no such thing." I stepped forward, my voice steadier than I expected. "The drink was meant for me. I saw him put something in my champagne when I was coming back from the restroom. I switched glasses with Amanda when no one was looking. I never thought she would drink it instead." Robert's face had gone from confused to thunderous. "What is she talking about, Michael?" "She's clearly hysterical," Michael countered smoothly. "Making wild accusations because she's upset about Amanda." The female officer, whose nameplate read Detective Rivera, turned to me. "Ma'am, you're saying you witnessed your husband put something in your drink and then you deliberately switched it with someone else's?" Put that way, my actions sounded terrible. Shame flooded me as I realized I'd endangered Amanda, whatever my reasons. "Yes, I panicked. I should have just confronted him or spilled the drink, but I was scared. I didn't think she would actually drink it." "We have it all on security footage," Ethan added. "Both the tampering and the glass switch." Detective Rivera nodded to her partner, who moved to stand beside Michael. "Sir, we're going to need you to come down to the station to answer some questions." "This is ridiculous," Michael sputtered, his cool composure finally cracking. "Jessica is making this up. She's been unstable lately, asking strange questions about our finances, accusing me of affairs." "Ask anyone." Actually, the restaurant manager interjected, holding up a small plastic bag containing what looked like a partially dissolved tablet recovered from the bottom of Amanda's glass. Our bartender noticed something unusual when he was clearing the table. "This doesn't look like something that belongs in champagne." Michael lunged suddenly, attempting to grab the evidence, but the male officer restrained him swiftly. "Michael Bradford, you're under arrest for attempted assault with a noxious substance. You have the right to remain silent." As the officer continued reciting the Miranda rights, Patricia collapsed into a chair, her hand over her mouth. Robert stood frozen, his expression cycling through disbelief, rage, and devastation. Jessica, he finally said, turning to me. Is what you're saying true? Michael tried to drug you. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. The reality of what had almost happened, what my husband had intended to do to me, hit me with full force. Why? Patricia whispered, her voice barely audible. Why would he do such a thing? Detective Rivera was professional but kind as she explained what would happen next. We'll need statements from everyone here. Mrs. Bradford, we'll need you to come to the station as well. We'll also need access to your home to search for additional evidence. As Michael was led away in handcuffs, he locked eyes with me one final time. The mask had completely fallen away, revealing a coldness I'd never seen before. You'll regret this, he said quietly, just before the officers guided him through the door. The restaurant manager provided a private room where Detective Rivera took my initial statement. I recounted the events of the evening, my growing suspicions over recent months, and the previous incidents that now seemed sinister in retrospect. Do you have any idea why your husband might want to drug you? She asked, her pen poised above her notepad. I shook my head slowly. Not for certain. But recently, I discovered he'd taken out a large life insurance policy on me without my knowledge. I found the paperwork while looking for a tax document. When I asked him about it, he said it was standard estate planning that his financial advisor had recommended. Detective Rivera's expression remained neutral, but I saw her write something and underline it twice. We'll look into that. In the meantime, is there somewhere safe you can stay tonight? A friend or family member? I thought of Sophia, the friend I'd neglected for too long. Yes, I have someone I can call. Good. An officer will escort you to collect some essential items from your home after we've conducted an initial search. Do not go alone under any circumstances. As I sat there in the quiet room, watching police officers gather evidence and take statements from the Bradford family, the enormity of what had happened, and what had almost happened, washed over me. My marriage, my sense of safety, my entire reality had shattered in a single evening. My phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. It was Tyler, Amanda's stable. Doctors say it was Rohypnol. A lot of it. They're keeping her overnight for observation. What the hell is going on, Jessica? I stared at the message, unable to formulate a response that could possibly explain the inexplicable. How could I tell him that his brother-in-law had intended to drug his own wife, and that I had inadvertently made Amanda the victim instead? As if sensing my distress, Detective Rivera placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. One step at a time, Mrs. Bradford. Right now, you're safe, and that's what matters most. But as police officers photographed the crime scene and bagged evidence, as waitstaff whispered behind their hands, as Robert comforted a weeping Patricia, I couldn't feel safe. Not yet. Because one question kept echoing in my mind. What had Michael planned to do to me once I was unconscious? The next 48 hours passed in a blur of police interviews, evidence collection, and shocking revelations. Detective Martinez, not Rivera as I'd initially thought, became a constant presence, her calm professionalism a stabilizing force as my world continued to unravel. I stayed with Sophia, who had immediately cleared her guest room when I called that night from the police station. She asked no questions when I arrived with a police escort at midnight, my eyes swollen from crying, clutching a small overnight bag. She simply hugged me, made tea, and sat with me until I could finally speak. My husband tried to drug me, I whispered, the words sounding surreal even as I said them. On our anniversary, with his whole family watching. Sophia's expression shifted from shock to fierce protectiveness. You're staying here as long as you need. No arguments. The next morning, Detective Martinez arrived with news. The preliminary toxicology report confirmed that the substance in Amanda's system was indeed Rohypnol, a powerful sedative known as a date rape drug at a dangerously high dose. If your sister-in-law had finished that champagne, Martinez explained carefully, she could have stopped breathing. The amount we found suggests your husband wasn't just trying to incapacitate you, Jessica. This was potentially lethal. I pressed my hands against my mouth, trying to suppress a wave of nausea. Michael hadn't just wanted to drug me, he'd wanted to kill me. We've executed a search warrant on your home, Martinez continued. We found a significant quantity of various sedatives hidden in your husband's home office, along with financial documents you should know about. Those documents revealed the extent of Michael's deception. He had taken out not one but 3 life insurance policies on me over the past year, totaling $5 million. Our joint investment accounts had been systematically drained, with millions transferred to offshore accounts in his name only. Even more disturbing was what they found on his laptop and phone. Michael had been conducting an affair with his colleague Vanessa for over 18 months. Their text messages revealed not just infidelity, but a carefully constructed plan. "I can't wait to start our new life together," Vanessa had written 3 weeks ago. "Once she's gone, the insurance money will set us up beautifully." Michael had responded, "Anniversary dinner is the perfect opportunity. Her death will look like a tragic accident or medical event. No one will suspect anything." When confronted with this evidence, Vanessa quickly turned on Michael, claiming she thought he was planning to divorce me, not murder me. She provided prosecutors with additional evidence in exchange for immunity, including recordings of conversations where Michael explicitly discussed his plan to drug me, stage an accident, and collect the insurance money. For days after the restaurant incident, I sat in attorney Catherine Wong's office, still struggling to process everything. Catherine specialized in both divorce and criminal cases involving domestic violence. Her reputation for fierce advocacy made her office feel like the first truly safe space I'd encountered since that night. "We're filing for an emergency restraining order," she explained, sliding documents across her desk for my signature, "and expediting the divorce proceedings on grounds of attempted murder," which, sadly, is not a sentence I get to say often in my practice. "What about Amanda?" I asked, the guilt still weighing heavily on me. "Is she pressing charges against me for switching the glasses?" Catherine shook her head. "Actually, she wants to meet with you. She's been released from the hospital and is recovering at her parents' home. She's asked to speak with you privately." The thought of facing Amanda filled me with dread, but I knew I owed her that much. The next day, I drove to the Bradford family estate in Wellesley, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. The mansion where Michael had grown up looked as imposing as ever, its colonial facade and manicured grounds speaking of old money and privilege. Patricia met me at the door, her appearance dramatically changed from the polished socialite I knew. She looked older, worn down by grief and shock. "Amanda's in the sunroom," she said quietly, leading me through the house. Before we reached the doorway, she paused and turned to me. "Jessica, I want you to know. Robert, and I don't blame you. We should have seen what Michael was becoming. Perhaps we did see it and chose to ignore the signs." The admission stunned me into silence. In all our years of marriage, this was the first time Patricia had spoken to me with genuine emotion rather than polite formality. Amanda sat in a wicker chair by the windows, a blanket across her lap despite the warm spring day. Her typically perfect appearance was muted, hair pulled back simply, face free of makeup, wearing what appeared to be pajamas under a robe. She looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. "Jessica," she said when she saw me, gesturing to the chair opposite hers. "Thank you for coming." I sat down awkwardly, unsure what to say. "Amanda, I'm so sorry about what happened. I never thought you would drink from that glass. I just panicked and—" "Stop," she interrupted, raising a hand. "You don't need to apologize. My brother tried to murder you. The fact that I got caught in the crossfire is, well, it's horrifying, but it's not your fault." Her directness surprised me. "The doctors say there won't be any permanent damage," she continued. "Which is apparently lucky given the dose he used." She shuddered slightly, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. The police showed me the texts between Michael and that woman. They were planning your death like it was a vacation itinerary. Tears filled my eyes. I never saw it coming, Amanda. How did I not see who he really was? A bitter smile crossed her face. Because he didn't want you to see. That's what Michael does. What he's always done. He shows people exactly what he wants them to see. She paused, then added more softly, I enabled it. All those years, the way I treated you. I bought into his narrative that you weren't good enough for him, that you were somehow taking advantage of our family name and connections. You never liked me, I said simply, not as an accusation, but as a statement of fact. I never knew you, she corrected. I never tried to know you. I just accepted Michael's version of you, and for that, I'm truly sorry. In that moment, something shifted between us. Not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition of our shared victimization by the man we had both loved in different ways. As the weeks passed, the case against Michael built steadily. Detective Martinez kept me informed of each development. The discovery of previous poisoning attempts evidenced by trace elements in hair samples taken from my hairbrush, hidden cameras found in our bedroom and bathroom, records of Michael researching untraceable poisons and natural-looking causes of death in women my age. The most chilling discovery came when police found a detailed timeline in Michael's personal email drafts, outlining exactly what he planned to do with my body after I lost consciousness at the restaurant. He had reserved a cabin in the Berkshires under a false name, prepared with plastic sheeting, chemicals, and digging tools. Through it all, I underwent therapy with Dr. Roberts, a specialist in trauma and betrayal. In those sessions, I began the painful process of reconstructing my understanding of my decade-long marriage. Had any of it been real? Had Michael ever truly loved me, or had I simply been a convenient mark for a calculating sociopath? The person you married didn't exist, Dr. Roberts explained gently. You fell in love with a carefully constructed facade. The grieving you're experiencing is real and valid, but it's important to understand that you're not grieving the loss of Michael. You're grieving the loss of who you thought he was. 6 months after that fateful anniversary dinner, as Michael awaited trial in custody after being denied bail, I found myself in the unlikely position of having coffee with Amanda at a small cafe in Cambridge. Our newly forming friendship was tentative but genuine, built on the shared experience of having our illusions about Michael shattered in the most traumatic way possible. The prosecutors say it's an airtight case, Amanda told me, stirring her latte absently. Between the video evidence, the toxicology reports, the financial paper trail, and Vanessa's testimony, he's facing 20 to life. I nodded, still unable to fully reconcile the Michael I thought I knew with the man capable of such calculated evil. I keep wondering if there were signs I missed. Moments when the mask slipped that I explained away. Amanda reached across the table and squeezed my hand, a gesture that would have been unimaginable a year ago. We both missed them, Jessica. Because we both loved him in our different ways. That's not our failure. It's his betrayal. As we sat there, 2 women rebuilding our lives from the wreckage one man had created, I realized that through this nightmare, I had gained something unexpected, the sister I never had. And together, we would ensure that Michael Bradford never had the opportunity to harm anyone else again. 1 year after that fateful anniversary night, I stood in my new apartment in Cambridge, watching autumn leaves swirl past my window. The space was entirely mine, chosen by me, decorated by me, a sanctuary that had never known Michael's presence. I'd sold the brownstone in Back Bay, unable to feel comfortable in rooms where I now knew hidden cameras had once recorded my most private moments. My therapy sessions with Dr. Roberts continued, though we'd reduced them to bi-weekly rather than twice a week. The nightmares had become less frequent, and I no longer flinched when my phone rang unexpectedly or when someone approached me from behind in public places. Small victories, Dr. Roberts called them. Stepping stones on the path to healing. Recovery isn't linear, she reminded me often. Some days will feel like backsliding, but that doesn't erase your progress. On this particular morning, I was preparing for Michael's sentencing hearing. The trial had concluded 3 weeks earlier with a guilty verdict on all counts: attempted murder, assault with a noxious substance, fraud, conspiracy, and a host of financial crimes discovered during the investigation. Today, he would learn his fate. A soft knock at my door announced Amanda's arrival. Our unlikely friendship had deepened over the months, forged in the fire of shared trauma and recovery. "Ready?" she asked when I opened the door. She looked nervous, but determined in a simple navy dress, a far cry from the designer outfits and perfect makeup she'd once considered essential for public appearances. "As I'll ever be," I replied, grabbing my purse and the victim impact statement I'd worked on for weeks. In the courthouse, we sat together in the front row, flanked by Sophia on one side and Tyler on the other. Robert and Patricia had chosen to submit written statements rather than attend in person. The toll on their health, particularly Robert's, had been severe. He'd aged a decade in a single year, his once commanding presence diminished by the shame and grief of his son's crimes. When Michael was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, handcuffed and escorted by officers, I forced myself to look directly at him. The man I'd once loved, once built a life with, once trusted completely, now appeared smaller somehow. His eyes met mine briefly before sliding away, unable to maintain contact. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair, reviewed the case details before inviting me to speak. As I approached the podium, my prepared statement clutched in trembling hands, I took a deep breath and looked not at Michael, but at the wall just above his head. "Your Honor, 1 year ago, I believed I was celebrating a milestone of love and partnership. Instead, I discovered the depth of betrayal possible from the person I trusted most in this world. Michael didn't just attempt to take my life. He stole years of it through deception, manipulation, and psychological abuse that I'm only now beginning to fully understand." My voice grew stronger as I continued, detailing not just the events of that night, but the insidious way Michael had isolated me from friends and family, controlled our finances, and gradually eroded my independence and self-confidence. The woman who switched those glasses a year ago was desperate and terrified, acting on instinct rather than reason. I regret the harm that came to Amanda, but I will never regret the actions that ultimately saved my life and exposed the truth. I turned slightly, finally allowing myself to look directly at Michael. "I don't hate you anymore. That's the most surprising part of this journey. Hatred would keep me tethered to you, and I choose freedom instead. What I feel now is pity. Pity for someone so empty inside that destroying others became your purpose." When I returned to my seat, Amanda squeezed my hand. Then it was her turn to speak, her testimony equally powerful as she described not just the physical trauma of being drugged, but the emotional devastation of learning her beloved brother had been capable of such calculated cruelty. The judge's sentence came as a relief: 30 years without possibility of parole. Michael would be an old man before he breathed free air again. As he was led away, he turned once more to look at us, his wife and his sister, standing together where he had never imagined we would be. Whatever he might have said was lost as the door closed behind him, removing him from our lives as decisively as his actions had removed him from our hearts. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered with microphones and cameras. Amanda and I had prepared a brief statement, which she delivered while I stood silently beside her. We had agreed early on that she would be the public face of our story, her social connections and media savvy, making her better equipped to handle the press interest that had swirled around the case. "Today marks the end of a painful chapter for our family," she stated clearly. "While no sentence can undo the trauma Michael inflicted, we take comfort in knowing justice has been served. We now ask for privacy as we continue our healing journey." That journey had taken unexpected forms for both of us. Amanda had left her position as a gallery curator to train as a victim's advocate, working with survivors of domestic violence. I had sold my marketing agency and launched a nonprofit organization called Trust Again, providing resources and support for survivors of intimate partner deception and abuse. 6 months after the sentencing, on what would have been my 11th wedding anniversary, I hosted a different kind of celebration, the official launch of Trust Again's new headquarters in downtown Boston. Amanda served on our board of directors, along with Detective Martinez, who had retired from the police force to join our organization full-time. As I addressed the room full of supporters, survivors, and advocates, I was struck by how far I'd come from the frightened woman who had switched champagne glasses in desperation. When trust is shattered, we often believe we can never feel safe again, I told the gathered crowd. But what I've learned, what all of us here have learned, is that we can rebuild. Not the same structure that existed before, but something new, something stronger, with foundations rooted in wisdom rather than wishful thinking. Later that evening, as the event wound down, I found myself on the rooftop terrace with Amanda, watching the sunset paint the Boston skyline in shades of gold and pink. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" she asked, gesturing between us. "Friends? Partners in crime fighting?" The small joke, still rare from the formerly serious Amanda, made me smile. "Never in a million years," I admitted. "But then again, I never thought my husband would try to kill me, so clearly my predictive abilities need work." She laughed, a genuine laugh that reached her eyes. "To terrible predictions and better realities," she said, raising her glass of sparkling water and toast. As we clinked glasses, I felt a sense of peace that had been elusive for so long. The path forward wasn't clear or certain. Real life never offered the neat resolutions of storybooks, but I was no longer walking it alone or in fear. Michael had planned to end my story that night at Fleming's Steakhouse. Instead, he had inadvertently given me the chance to begin a new one written entirely in my own hand, on my own terms, with chapters yet to be imagined. I turned to face the sunset, feeling the warm breeze against my skin and the promise of tomorrow in my heart. Sometimes, the most powerful words in our story aren't the dramatic ones that come at the height of crisis, but the quiet ones we whisper to ourselves in the aftermath. I survived. I am free. I am enough. And those words become not just an ending, but a beginning. Have you ever had to trust your instincts in a dangerous situation? Or discovered someone wasn't who you thought they were? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible even after the deepest betrayals. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, trust your gut, document everything, and never be afraid to rewrite your ending.